I'm Loui Reynoso. I am the founder and I am the director of Barber Society, along with Mo Down Barber Exhibit, Malu's brand, Lab Education, and Dapper Sundays, which is an event that we do as well. All right, so as far as SB 803, the last update I gave you, the California Senate had voted unanimously to pass this bill. The bill is now in I believe, the assembly floor. So a lot of you, there's confusion. I've had teachers reach out to me or administrators from school reach out to me and say, hey, can you talk to our students, because there's confusion out there. There's misinformation. They're saying that the bill has passed and that this is now law and it's gone into effect. And they don't want to come to school anymore. They're trying to abandon their program, right? So the bill will not be into effect until the governor of the state of California signs that bill. And so that hasn't occurred yet. There's still other processes in place before that happens. And so if you're not aware of the bill, one, we've posted a link up there so that you can go and read it all yourself. This bill is broad. It doesn't just affect the barber and beauty industry, but this part of the bill begins the process of deregulation. And so there's been a lot of conversation. Are we for it? Are we against it? We ran a poll here on our page, and the majority of people, actually, I would say over 70%, close to 80% of people want our industry to continue to be regulated and licensed. And so the bill begins to kind of take some of those pieces away. Why it's confusing, and you see particularly in our industry. So I want to give you a picture of our industry. I like to call it a sector instead of an industry. It's a sector with 3 branches. So we're one tree, and they know us as a beauty industry, the barber beauty industry. One tree, 3 branches: hair, skin, and nails, right? And so what this bill does, it expands the scope for skin, which is our estheticians, of what they can do, which they've been fighting for a long time. But what it does for the other branch of that same tree is it cuts it off for people that do hair. So what this bill is asking for is for the testing to go away, and for hair, whether it's cutting, styling, dressing hair, or any of that, is removed from the scope of practice of our license, which means that anyone can do it. They wouldn't need a license. They wouldn't need to take a test. They wouldn't need to have any basic knowledge of the things that we study, that we go to school for. And so the people funding this bill, so let's break it down into small bite-sized pieces, because why I do these lives is so that you're aware of what's happening. And the information that I get, a lot of times, it seems more confusing than what it is. But I'm going to give you bite-sized pieces so that you can also share this with other people. This bill begins that process of deregulation. It opens it up. It turns it into, right now, our sector. So think of it, just like a piece of pie, right? This is our entire industry. This is a terrible circle, and don't judge my drawings. Right now, corporations only own about 8% of that market share, right? This is all like the big boys, right? We're talking about the Supercuts, or all of the people on that list that we dropped, that we're going to keep dropping lists of companies that are funding this bill to go through. Currently, corporations, don't make fun of my writing either. I write sloppy, but it makes sense. Corporations own 8% of the market share, right? Small business, independent contractors, mom and pop shops, whatever you guys want to call it, and ICs, independent contractors, they take up most of the industry, the majority of the industry. So historically, our industry has always been a gateway, particularly for marginalized communities like the LGBTQ plus community, women, people of color, immigrants, veterans, this industry has been an access to ownership opportunities. And so when we talk about long-term effects, we all know, or at least I hope you know, and if you didn't, then today you will find out, that the real way to change wealth or accrue wealth, to change your situation long-term, is through ownership opportunities. That's the real long-term game for anyone. You want to be able to own something, to either give ownership opportunities to other people or to employ other people, and to be able to pass this down, right? Because this is how generational wealth is created. And that's what this industry, this sector has historically been. And for a long time, we really just kind of flew under the radar. COVID came and took the lid off of the personal care sector for a lot of reasons, but the most important one was the demand. People realized that with personal care, that it was a necessity, that it was a human ritual. It was beyond a ritual. It was a necessity. You had to have it. And people were willing to go through great lengths to get these services and to be able to have these experiences. And so we've always known that our sector is a multi-billion-dollar sector. Our sector is independent, small businesses. We know this, right? And so what is happening now? Why is this bill so important? Because this bill is being funded by the corporations to begin the deregulation process. And the deregulation process isn't necessarily that it's just going to do away with the state board and, we're not going to have anybody regulating us, but it's really the transfer of power to the corporations for them to write the rules to how the game gets played here. Now, if you've never visited or have worked or lived in a country that is already deregulated when it comes to our industry, I welcome you and I encourage you to please do some research and just see the long-term effects of what this does. Now, one of the examples that I give that is probably the one that we'll see within the shortest amount of time is going to be that as these companies begin to water down the training of what it takes to become a professional, because that's what our license gets us and our training gets us. It's not just our license, it's the training that you get before the license. Once these companies like Sports Clips decides that, we're just going to turn this, instead of it being an independent contractor, or instead of them being single owner operators or whatever it is, instead of doing that, we want to make that part of the market smaller so that we can turn that into employment. And if we can turn all these people into employees, we can pay them an hourly wage. And these smaller shops will eventually fade out. There won't be that many. Now, they're not going to go completely away before the people that come on here and say, well, I'm going to be good. Me and mine, we're going to be good. I'm not worried about the rest. I invite you to think of a time to ask your parents, if you're young, to ask your parents of a time when the local boutique used to exist in your neighborhood. I invite you to think of a time when there was local convenience stores and not just 7-Elevens in your neighborhoods. I'm a 90s kid. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in the early 80s, so I grew up in the 90s. I grew up going to the corner little store, the tiendita in my block. Some people call it bodega, whatever it is, however you call it. These little stores, these little tiny businesses that give the community so much color. These are people's livelihoods. And what we don't understand, when we make that door smaller for people, and we just turn them into employment, right? Instead of just ownership, you really put them at a disadvantage, because you have to look at who makes up the population in these industries. And our industry is made up majority of individuals who belong to communities that already are marginalized and that already are at a disadvantage, because there's systems in place to not allow them access to opportunity. And so This industry, this sector, has been a safe space for all of those people, has historically been a safe space for trans men and women to even be able to have ownership opportunities, has historically, even look back at some of our lives when I shared the book on barbers during slavery. I'll give you the full title. I can't remember off the top of my head. And in these stories, it talks about how, Black barbers during slavery were able to put themselves in positions of ownership, in positions of even having more access to opportunities that other people, just because not only did they practice this profession, but the profession created a bridge. We're talking about, think about a time during segregation, think about a time during slavery where a Black person couldn't drink from the same drinking fountain or water fountain than a white person, but a Black barber would be able to cut a white man's hair or a white woman's hair or whatever it is, right? And so it creates these bridges. So when these big corporations come in, it's like inflation. Just because they come in and there's more doesn't mean that the market is just going to automatically, there's just going to be more market around it. No, it just means that they come in and they take up a bigger piece. And in that bigger piece, that piece for ownership, this big piece right now that we all have to share for ownership, that piece is going to get smaller because they're trying to get their piece. This little one right now, that little 8% that they have right now, they're trying to get that piece to go bigger and bigger and bigger until we only have this little piece down here to fight over. Because that's what happens. It's about ownership. And if the companies, the corporations, have the money to fund the politicians like Senator Roth in Riverside, who authored this bill, they get to write the rules to the game that we all play every single day of our lives, that some of us have committed our life to. So as this continues, because now we are going to organize again, and mobilize again. As this continues, I want you to really understand that it's not just about a piece of paper. It's about what that piece of paper represents, and also the fact that if we allow corporations to continue to write the rules to the game, we have no control over who sits at their board or how long they sit at their board. So we are at the mercy of boardrooms dictatorship over our industry. And though, listen, I'm not a fan of politicians myself, and as you guys have known, I took a very active stance against the governor and his actions towards our sector during the shutdown, I can vote people in or out. You can vote people in or out of government. You can participate in government. You can be that change if you want to. And so when people ask me, it's really the worst of two evils. Which one is going to harm me the least? And for me, I always want to have the choice to be able to vote somebody out of power. I don't want our sector to be at the mercy of the CEO of Riverside. I don't want my industry to be at the mercy of the CEO of JCPenney, because they have a salon inside of their stores and they can't get professionals to come and work there and stay there. So guess what? JCPenney wants to offer their own training, just like they do their salespeople on the floor. You have no sales experience? Don't worry. We just need you to have open availability and some willingness. We'll train you. We'll pay you hourly. And there you go. That's what they want to do to our industry. That is really ultimately what will happen. And when people say, I will be okay, yeah, we will be okay. Everybody learns to evolve and everybody learns to do all of these things, right? But at the same time, I feel like for us to just sit back and let it happen yet again, there's a reason why our industry has always been under attack. And for a lot of us, it's new. For a lot of you, it's new. Like, you haven't heard of it, or you haven't been involved, or you're new to the industry, so you don't even know what the heck is going on. You know, you just pulled up. But the reality is that there's been people behind the scenes for 20, 30, 40 years who have dedicated their life to really making sure that, you know, these things, first of all, that they're caught before they even happen, that they organize and they fund it, you know, because even in that, our industry isn't united. People ask me all the time, why do they keep coming after us? Why do they treat us like that? They don't treat other industries like that. They're organized. They have, not only are they organized with people and they have the power of people, but then, you know, there's money behind it. And ultimately, that's what it is. Let's be real. Who makes the rules? Whoever has the money to pay to write those rules. And that's what's happening here. You got companies like Riverside, JCPenney's, and a list of others that are funding this bill, giving funding Senator Roth in Riverside to write this bill, to push this bill through along with other people, so that the rules benefit them without a care in the world to the majority of the population of this industry. So that's what this bill is about. There's a lot of other things in there, like I said, but to me, the reason why I can't just stand back and like watch it all unfold is because I feel what it really threatens is the ownership opportunities within our industry. And we all know that you can live okay, you know, with a job. And even now, let's be real, most people can't even live off of one salary. Most people are working two jobs, or, you know, there's the majority of people don't have a single income household. So it's tough out there. And to me, one thing that I've always appreciated about this industry, and I left, you know, working for the corporate world and working for big companies and whatever, I left all of that because that's exactly what I felt. I would work my ass off. But there was always this glass ceiling. There was always someone over me trying to, you know, that could control, not just if I moved up in the organization, but how much I got compensated for that. And so when I left that world and came to this industry, one of the biggest draws for me was the fact that I controlled my own destiny, that I controlled, that not only can I control the amount of income that I generated for myself, but that I could actually create something that I could have for the rest of my life and that could take care of me for the rest of my life. And that's what ownership is. And I wanted to be able to transfer that ownership down. And so this is the beginning of a long process. I hope that at least if, you know, you still haven't made up your mind of where you're at on it, or even like maybe you don't feel like you're even interested, you know, put your ear to the ground and start listening to some of these things, because they will affect our business. They will affect the way that the consumer behaves. It will affect, like I said, ownership opportunities. And we won't see the effects right away, but long term, it could be something that will really change the landscape of what we know in this industry to be for all of these marginalized communities that I've talked to you about, that I am a part of as well. I never thought that, you know, when I picked up a pair of clippers or shears, or when I became a barber, that eventually I would be doing this type of work. But I can't sit back and just you know, just let the chips fall where they may, like, because I know that I'm gonna be good. I can't do that. That's not my style. Let me see. The Barbers Market Inc. says, I respect Barbers Society LA, but SB 803 has nothing to do with ownership opportunities. Well, respectfully, I disagree. And like I said, it's actually put on your lenses with the bigger scope. When you have corporations coming in and writing regulation, because that's what's happening. Don't get it twisted. A senator wrote it by his hand, but it's being funded by the corporations. You cannot say, and you can look at any other sector where this has happened, you cannot say that it affects ownership opportunities for marginalized communities. You just can't say that. Look at the landscape. Drive around today, go a mile, go 2 miles, 5-mile radius around your block, and you tell me how many small little shop like tienditas do you see as opposed to 7-Elevens? How many small coffee shops do you see as opposed to Starbucks? That's all I'm saying. You cannot say when corporations come into play into your arena, you cannot say that it does not affect the other people there. Just go look at the landscape in other sectors. The thing is that sometimes people come at me in the sense like, this hasn't happened around us. No, it's our turn now. It's our turn now. It's not that it hasn't happened around us. It's happened all around us. And now it's finally our turn. They're going to do it to us. That's what we're saying. If you want to get granular, yes, it's about sanitation and cutting hours and all the above. But if you've ever been on my lives, and I don't know if you have, when you talk to me, you got to put on the bigger. I don't go from granular to big. I go from big to granular. I go backwards. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm talking about. So, but I get your perspective, and that's why we linked it up there so that people can make up their own mind. But to me, the point that I was making was macro. And so the counterpoint felt micro. And it's yes, there's like a valid point to that, right? But I want you guys to think on the macro level. And if you don't believe me, when you see a Starbucks, when you see a 7-Eleven, when you see a McDonald's, you're going to think about me. This industry is made up of people who already have survived a lot. And now we want to thrive. And we should have all of the room in the world to be able to stretch our branches out as far as we want to. And so we're not saying to the corporations, don't come into our space and play. We're not saying that. There's room for everybody. There's people out there that don't want to run their small business because it's a tough. You got to be cut out for that. Some people do just want a job. Some people do want that security of that hourly, whether they have a client or not. We're not saying that there's not room for them. We're not. We're just saying that they have to listen to us, take account of us, and keep enough space for us to be able to continue to have this industry be what historically it always has been, which has been a safe place for marginalized communities to find ownership and to change the generational wealth of themselves and their families. That's it. So with that, I'm going to say good night. I love you. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.